Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Maryland is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My staff prepared a speech for me today. I'm going to set that aside and just speak to the witnesses today who are survivors. And I want to say that I certainly offer my condolences. My heart goes out to you for the losses that you've suffered. I did want to say this too, though, in a slight departure from the script that these hearings typically take. I'm a former prosecutor. I spent 4 years as a prosecutor here in Washington, D.C. During the height of the crack wars, we averaged about 450 to 500 murders here per year. And then a short time after that, I became the state's attorney in Prince George's County, Maryland. Ms. Moore and Ms. Nobles, I think you're both from Maryland, and I think the people that handled your cases were state's attorneys as well. And one of the things I found, I got there in office in 2002. I didn't realize it when I was running, but there was a gang called MS-13 that had come to the district, Maryland and Virginia, and was a highly violent gang. They are organized criminally, and they were 20 plus years ago at the time, and they commit extreme violent acts along the lines of what you're talking about. Include, I think the first case we had was they killed a witness with a golf club. As a 14-year-old girl, they tricked her into going into a cemetery, and they beat her to death in the head using a golf club to kill her. And I guess Bush was the president at the time, and we had similar kinds of issues as what we're talking about today. People going and coming back, they'd get deported from here even after being prosecuted. They made them serve out their jail time, and then they would deport them back to El Salvador. But one of them I talked to subsequently, he'd become a witness against other members in the gang, said basically they just viewed it as a free trip home because they knew that they could come back whenever they wanted to. And that was 2003. I think one of the things I'd like to say to you all is I deeply respect taking up the mantle that you've taken up today. You're able to speak with a moral authority that politicians like me really can't. And I know you'd rather trade that in a heartbeat to get your loved ones back. And I know we can't do that today. But I'll say this as well. I've been involved in public service for a long time. In fact, that was my first boss in politics right there, John Conyers. He was the chairman of the committee last time it passed legislation on immigration, which was over 35 years ago. And I also had a chance to, and they did that on a bipartisan basis, by the way. And when I was state's attorney in Prince George's County, we did a joint prosecution with the federal prosecutor in a RICO case. We took down 23 gang leaders. The prosecutor in that case was Rod Rosenstein. And Rod and I had known each other because we'd been on the opposite sides of the Whitewater case. I worked for the Senate Democrats, essentially defending the Clinton administration. He worked for Ken Starr, essentially trying to take down the Clinton administration. And he was obviously a Republican, I was obviously a Democrat, but we were able to come together and work that case together and do it in a successful way. Now, you'll notice that at this hearing that there's no legislation connected to the testimony that's being presented today. I think one of you actually referenced Ted Cruz legislation in the Senate side, but there's nothing pending here in the House that would address the problems we're talking about today. We had the chance to do that, but we chose not to do that. The chairman and my Republican colleagues chose not to do that, and there's a story behind that I don't have time to tell, but it doesn't really get to the point I want to make to you, which is this. Beyond this election cycle, because that's an issue that's in the way of getting something done right now that'll address the kinds of problems that you're talking about, there's going to be more opportunities for you to use your voices and your platforms to address these kinds of issues. I'm a Democrat, you're Republicans, or they're Republicans, you may be independents, I don't know. But I know that there's truth on both sides on this issue, and there's a way to get to a place where we can resolve it, but we won't do it in a partisan way. And so I want to thank you for coming today. And I urge you to continue the struggle, the fight, the voice. I think, Ms. Nungari, you said you will forever be her voice. I know that's true for all of you, and I encourage you to continue in that fight and that effort. But I hope that we can get to a point where we move beyond the partisanship, beyond the politics that have nothing to do with resolving the problem, and can get to a place where we can address it. Can I, just for an additional moment, Mr. Chairman, if I could read Justice Kavanaugh, this is a quote I read every time we have a hearing like this. And he's a Republican, obviously, but I want to say, as the district court found, the executive branch does not possess the resources necessary to arrest or remove all of the non-citizens covered by the arrest and removal statutes. That reality is not an anomaly, it is a constant. For the last 27 years since those laws were enacted in their current form, all 5 presidential administrations have determined that resource constraints necessitated prioritization in making immigration arrests. In light of the inevitable resource constraints and regularly changing public safety and public welfare needs, the executive branch must balance many factors when devising arrest and prosecution policies. I read that just to say this. 5 administrations have come and gone. We still haven't gotten things done. We're not going to get anything done today from a legislative standpoint, but there's a way to get it done if we can come together and work in a bipartisan way to do it. And so I thank you for the work that you've done and you will continue to do. And I yield back the balance.
The gentleman yields back. Before yielding to the gentleman from Arizona, I would just point out, bad things may have happened 20 years ago, but obviously more bad things are happening now in light of 10 million people in 3.5 years coming into the country. That's the different dynamic. That's what our witnesses are talking about. I yield to the gentleman from Arizona.
If I might,
Mr.
Chairman?
I gave you an extra 2 minutes,
Mr. Chairman, thank you. And what I point out is, I don't want to get distracted